Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Indian Boxer Ring. My name is Ishwar, and our guest today is Rhoda Straby-Ace. Rhoda is the breeder of boxers under the prefix Tickitbou Boxers. I might maybe get the pronunciation wrong, but she's going to correct me shortly. Uh, Now, she also has been she's also been breeding, or she's bred boxes for the last 31 years. Or she might not be actively breeding, but she started boxes in the year 1989. Rhoda is bred over 100 Canadian champions. Now, some of these champions have gone out and they have won bigger claims in other countries, namely in China, in India, Thailand, Philippines, to name a few. Rhoda is also a sweepstakes judge as well. And that's not all. Rhoda is also a professional handler. So she handles dogs and is on the road full time. Typically during a non-COVID season, it's very difficult to get in touch with Rhoda because she's in the shows all the time. So it is with great pleasure that we have Rhoda join us for an interview to share her thoughts. And if you could hear a little bit of a background from the back, from behind her of dogs barking, that's because she is at a showground, and the show starts in another 2 hours. So thank you, Rhoda, for taking the time to do this interview with us. How are you doing?
Good morning. It's my pleasure. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Wonderful. And this you're actually the second person, actually the second breeder handler that we interviewed who is at the shows after the COVID situation. So, just for the benefit of viewers, how is dog shows changed post COVID?
So, this is our first dog show back. Um, it is designed to be more of a show and go. So, if you're coming in with one breed, they ask you to come in and show your dog. When you're done competing at your level, whether it be the breed level or the group level, they're asking you to leave the premises. There's no spectators allowed, and only the people in your immediate setup, only the people that are necessary to be here can be here. So that's one interesting part. The other interesting part is that, of course, we're all showing with masks on. Um, we have an entrance to the ring and an exit from the ring that are completely separate to keep the flow of traffic down. The judges don't touch the ribbons. They're set on the table. You may take them or you may leave them. A lot of people are choosing to leave them because they have been handled, in multiple places and could be carrying the virus.
Hmm.
Apart from that, the ring procedures are basically the same. We are very good at keeping our distances in the ring. So, you want to work on that 6 foot or 2 meter distance. And most of our shows are limited now. This one was limited to only 200. We're actually at a farm on a private property. Um, so, we're having difficulty getting into facilities to do our shows.
Hmm.
So, this is wonderful that somebody graciously offered up their property for a show.
Right.
The next shows we have coming up, some are limited, some are not limited. Closing and getting entries in has been a huge stress when they're limited to 200 dogs. And
Mm.
as a handler, with 10 or 15 dogs, to get all those dogs in your lineup entered, you're online the second that show opens up.
Mm.
And shows have been closing in as little as 15 minutes with
Wow,
full
it's like a
entries.
it's like a sellout
It
for an event.
is, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very stressful. So
Right,
those are some of the challenges we're facing right now.
right, right,
But it's
right.
great to be back.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think we fans just can't wait to show our dogs, and I'm so glad that you had the opportunity before many of us, and wish you all the very best for the shows. But again, thank you for. I know you have some dogs to show today, and but again, for the benefit of viewers, if you had any questions for Rhoda, please feel free to put them in the comments, and we'll make sure that I put them in front of Rhoda. so that she can
Absolutely.
actually handle them for you. Rhoda, just for the benefit of people, I know about Rhoda, but there are a lot of new comers and fanciers that have tuned in. So could you share with our members when and how you got interested in purebred dogs, and specifically in boxers?
So I grew up with purebred dogs. My first recollection of our purebred dog was a collie as a young girl. We had a couple of collies, and from there we went to a boxer. My first boxer arrived in our family when I was about 8. Um, we had him for a very short time, only 3 years, and I suspect that cardiomyopathy probably was what took him. But back then, we just chalked it up to, he had a massive stroke or, something that just took him in the middle of the night type thing.
Hmm.
Um, so that was my first experience with boxers. Fabulous family dog. He was my best friend. From there, we had several Dobermans. And with our last Doberman, when I was still living at home, I started training in obedience and civil guard dog. And when I moved out on my own, the boxer stayed at home with my parents, and the place that I was doing civil guard dog training at actually bred Bouviers, and they were the first breeders to import Bouviers into Canada. So had beautiful breeding stock from Belgium. Um, I purchased my first dog from them with the intent of doing obedience and civil guard dog training. The breeder talked me into showing him and introduced me to someone who would become a very good friend of mine, to Sherry Robinson. So Sherry hauled me off to all the shows with her and soon threw me in the ring, and together we were handlers. So actually, my handling started before I even started breeding.
Mm.
Um, I co-bred a few litters of Bouviers with her, and to make the world even smaller, ended up marrying her ex-brother-in-law.
Hey.
So Wally then became my husband. He had been breeding collies since '74, so he had a huge background in breeding. Um, Before Wally and I got together, about a year before, I purchased my first boxer from Verena Yeager of Yeager House Boxers.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I put a championship on her, but she was very small. Her top line was not great. Not what I wanted to start a breeding program off with.
Right.
And fortunately, by showing her, I met some very, very wonderful people in the Canadian boxer world,
Hmm.
one of which was Lynn Beilhartz. And Lynn had, I'm kind of going into some more questions. Would you like me to slow down or keep going here?
Oh, no, no, no. I actually, you are getting into the next question, and that's
I
perfectly
am.
fine. You actually are mentioning a few mentors already. So my next question was going to be, if you had any mentors in the sport. So yes, please do continue. You
Okay.
mentioned two names, Verena Yeager and Lynn Beilhart. Beilhart.
Beilhartz, yes.
Beilhart. That's right. Yeah, please carry on.
Okay, so, I'll just tell the story. I know the questions are going to fall into this part of the story, but Lynn had imported two puppies from the United Kingdom, from Sheila of Rupik Boxers, Brandforth, Sheila Brandforth.
Hmm.
And she had imported a beautiful male, brindle, and a lovely fawn bitch. And I saw the fawn bitch at a show, and she had everything that I wanted. She had the beautiful front, the beautiful rear, the beautiful face, top line tail set. I looked into her pedigree. She was actually sired by a Canadian dog. So, a dog that was sired by Shirley Bell's Texas,
Hmm.
and was exported to the UK, had sired this beautiful puppy of Lynn's. So Paige and Lynn had personality conflicts. She was a difficult bitch. She could be a little on the shy side, and you really had to get into her head to figure her out. And it just wasn't working, and I offered to take her. And she actually became a really great show dog for me, and she became my foundation bitch. So I had friendships with Lynn, I had friendships with Shirley Bell, and everything kind of developed, and Sheila Brandforth in the UK, everything kind of developed from there. So that was my
Wonderful.
start in boxers, and that
Thank
was the
you. Thank you so
beginning.
much, Rhoda.
Yeah.
Now, I know you actually got into my third question there. Well, that's perfectly fine. We are doing really good on time. But I wanted to actually hear a bit more about your thought process. And you did mention that on your thought process and why you started with English style boxers. Did you ever go back to the English style boxers again after you started with English style boxers?
So to say that my boxers were English style, I think gives a different impression as to how they actually looked.
Mm-hmm.
My dogs had UK pedigrees, but they went back to Sal Grey.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of American influence in that line. They were very much American style dogs. So when I had mentioned when Lynn had imported Rupik Doubleback, who we called Paige, she had also imported the boy, and he was sired by, if I believe correctly, 8 Bells, which was one of the top sires of the time in the UK, and again went back to a lot of the American dogs. So
Mm-hmm.
Chance came in, and I was approached to handle Chance by Lynn. He first went down to the States and was finished down there in very, very short time. And then came back to me, and we specialed him for a year in Canada, and he went back home to Lynn, and I was so emotional about sending that dog home. And I said, if he comes back to us again, Lynn, he's not going back home.
Mm-hmm.
So she approached me to take him for the second year, and Chance lived with us forever after that, and Lynn and I co-owned him.
Right.
So he was very, very much American style.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back at his pictures, you would be hard-pressed to guess that he was from any place other than North America.
Yeah, I think I do have a picture up on the screen. Not this one.
Not
This
that
is
one.
not this one. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
That's Chance.
yeah.
So very
Actually,
much.
and my apologies for the
Oh, it says
typo there.
foundation bitch. That's
It's a
okay.
foundation dog. It's not a bitch. Sorry.
Yes, it is a
Yes.
dog for sure.
Yes.
So that beautiful arch and neck tied into that high station withers. He was short back. He was well balanced front and rear. Was a little bit lazy as a show dog. We had to really condition him, which put him into a working frame of mind, and then he was fabulous. Once we got past that, he turned into be a fabulous show dog.
Right. Right. So thank you for that, Rhoda. Now, I actually wanted to. I have a lot of questions to ask you about handling. So I'm going to actually move on into the breeding part. So I actually my next question is about it's not an easy breed. Are not an easy breed to breed. They are very difficult. They have a lot of you have whites, and I'm not going into whites at this point. No,
No.
but but it's not easy. You get the everybody gets the idea. It's not an easy breed, and breeding 100 champions is no easy feat. Now, about breeding principles is what I'm going to ask you next. There, for the benefit of the novice fancier or the breeder who's tuned in and who's going to be watching this program later, uh, some terms that have that actually come to that are discussion points are inbreeding, line breeding, and outcrossing. What worked well for you
Morning,
in your
Brad.
breeding program?
So I was very fortunate to have Wally as a breeding partner. He brought to the table um, some really great breeding practices from the collies. They had gone through PRA with eye issues and had to do test breedings where you take a blind bitch that is positive for PRA and prove your stud dog with that. So he had quite a great knowledge at that time of genetics, line breeding, inbreeding, the whole bit. We didn't have a computer program to fall back on. Um, we had to physically research pedigrees and go from there. So he was basically my mentor in that area. I strongly believe in line breeding. Um, if I ever did an outcross, it was to a dog that was also strongly line bred and had all of the qualities that I was searching for and was known to produce those qualities.
Mhm.
Other than that, I would stay within my own family of dogs, going back to a grandfather or a great grandfather was something that I always tried to bring back in. And when I had the opportunity to have a fabulous bitch um, and a sire that was known to produce spot on dogs, I did do an inbreeding.
Mhm.
So, that's not out of the question either. But you have to know where you're going and what those two dogs produce on their own before you venture into something like that.
Got it. Actually, that you led me into my next question to you, which is about just like you have the flavor of the month, you also have the flavor of the day of the year. The top sire syndrome,
Yeah.
as they call it. Now, many breeders fall into. I wouldn't call this a trap because this is a very subjective decision,
It
and
is.
if whatever you feel is right, you do it. But again, many breeders make these decisions about going to a top winning dog, hoping to produce the next big thing. Um, Now, what are your thoughts about that particular topic? What do you think? What do you endorse that approach, or what is your opinion about that?
The dog is only as good as the pedigree that stands behind him.
Hmm.
Okay? So you can have the most fabulous dog, but is that dog going to produce? So take a look and see what comes before him. Have a look at the sire. See what the sire has produced. My train of thought is to go to that sire. It is the genetics that produced that beautiful dog that you want to go to. That beautiful
Hmm.
dog may not be able to give you what you're actually hoping for. Go to the sire.
Hmm.
Go to the sire. And if that fits into your breeding program, perfect.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a crapshoot and you get lucky and you get that beautiful dog. There were a
Mm.
few litter mates that were showing um, not so very long ago that when you have a look back through their pedigrees, you could kind of say that it was a very fortunate litter. Um, will they ever produce what they have? Who knows?
Mm.
Because there was no line breeding, there was really no consistency behind it, but you get lucky sometimes.
Right. Right. And And again, just to add, just to kind of add on to a supplemental question based on what you said, should you actually have a tightly line bred bitch before you went for an outcross like that? Do you
I
feel
would.
that is better?
I would, for sure. Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Before I head out for an outcross, if I'm trying to keep the look that I've developed in my line, I want my bitch tightly line bred before I go for an outcross. And if my bitch is tightly line bred, that's why I have to go for my outcross.
Right. Got it. Wonderful. Um, Now, my next question is actually about is about the way the dog looks, the phenotype of the dog. Um, you know, and again, they associate the phenotype of the dog to the kennel type. They actually say, if you look at this dog, it's unmistakable. This dog is coming from this particular kennel. Um, and that they say is the hallmark, of a breeder because they've managed to set up a
Right.
type, in terms of phenotype. Now, how important do you believe it is for a breeder to establish that kennel type?
Oh my gosh, I think it's paramount that you establish your own phenotype. Um, if you're a breeder or aspiring breeder and you don't have a breed type in your mind that you're striving for, how are you ever going to find direction in a breeding program? Um,
Right.
you're going to be all over the place, and there's actually going to be no type, no type within your breeding program whatsoever.
Right. Right. Okay. Was there? So, did you actually, when you started breeding, Rhoda, did you have that type, or was that a type that came with time? Was that?
If you look back on my foundation dogs,
Mhm.
very much the type was well established in them. Um, the Sal Grey dogs played a very important role in that breed type. The head style, the high stationed, the angulation was all well established. The dog that stood out in my mind from that era, though, was Woods End Crown Sable.
Mhm.
Okay, so for me, that dog was not accessible to me when I started breeding. He
Mhm.
wasn't just going to be bred to any new breeder starting out, or a dog that was a bitch imported from the UK or whatever. So he was not accessible to me, but that was the type that I was striving to produce, and it was very important to me that he was in pedigrees of the dogs that I was breeding to.
Right. Right. I've got a viewer's question here for you, Rhoda. So this is the question. I'm just going to put it on the screen. Do you consider breeding the same style together, who are not necessarily line bred, but both excellent type? Do you think this can be successful?
Um, I have a fellow breeder that started breeding boxers in Canada the same time I did, and he followed that principle. That principle's used a lot with racehorses.
Hmm.
Okay, so that was where his breeding philosophy came from. And he chose type to type. Type to type. Seldom did he line breed. He didn't feel that that would produce the health that he wanted, the type that he wanted. He wanted outcrosses and he wanted type. And he was very successful. He did very well. Um, Towards the end of his breeding career, he did start to line breed a bit more.
Hmm.
But, you know, we competed against each other in the ring and we both took our wins.
Hmm.
So you can go with a different philosophy. This is
Got
my
it.
philosophy in breeding, and this is what worked for me.
Hmm. Thank you. Now, that question actually came from a viewer in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
Eileen, who's also been a guest in this program, and she's a supporter for this program as well. So that question
Nice.
actually
Thank
came
you.
from Eileen. Thank you for that. Now, this is a question that a lot of us or has had at some point of time, right? You're starting off your kennel, you're getting a dog, you're infusing a new blood or introducing a new gene pool into your kennel, and you're going to and you're reaching out to this breeder who's a renowned breeder, who's got the best of dogs. Um, but there's also a theory that breeders don't sell their best dogs.
Mm-hmm.
They actually hold on to their best dogs themselves. Why would they do it? But what are your thoughts about that?
Well, as a breeder, yeah, to let my best dog go, we all know how hard it is to produce those good dogs. Um, they don't come around every day. So if I've got a fabulous dog, chances are it's not getting out of my hands. Um, I will sell second pick and, support you that way, but seldom am I going to let that first pick puppy go.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking back, and I really can't remember an occasion that I did let one go. And, throughout my career, I bred for myself. I always said, like, I'm not breeding dogs for others. This is myself. This is my breeding program. If these dogs are staying with me, if I get something great, then I've been successful. You know,
Right.
so if you're starting off, you're going to have to settle for second best, and you're going to have to create your best from that, and not necessarily the pick puppy that I've kept is going to be the producer.
Hmm. True.
That plain bitch that I sold a second pick puppy, that could be the top producer.
Hmm. Right. Right. Now, again, I want to actually, I want to go back and give you a little bit of a background, maybe just give you enough time for a sip of coffee. Um, the I actually, when I first, I remember calling you about 14, 15 years back and interviewing with you for a boxer puppy. You at that point of time, you used to place boxer puppies in foster homes.
Right.
You used to actually, keep them in. How successful were you with that arrangement?
That was a very great arrangement for me. Um, I always felt that if I could get a boxer puppy into the right family home and have them come back to me to be shown or for a litter, that was a win-win situation for both me and the foster family. So my foster families um, would have that dog for all of their life. There was never a charge for it. I covered all breeding fees. I covered all show expenses. Um, Occasionally, I had the odd one that would become a difficult situation, but that's expected in anything, and we would work through it. Maybe I would only bring the bitch back for a litter or use the dog once. Um, but on the whole, it was really, really good. You can't do that with every breed. If we were to put a collie into a pet home, it would come back to us as the ugliest, worst looking pet. They get pet syndrome so bad. Whereas if we put a boxer into a pet home, their personality, their condition is wonderful. And, we have a recommended feeding program. Sometimes we get the dog back for a month prior to a show to get it back into the show condition that we want it in. But you just can't do that with any breed.
Right.
And it also allowed us to keep our numbers down.
Hmm. Right, right. And again, breeding 100 champions is not an easy feat. I did state that before. But what was the what was your maximum kennel strength in terms of boxes at any given point of time?
Oh gosh. So we had to share the kennel between the collies. We would have up to 25, 30 dogs in the kennel at any given time. So, probably 12 boxers, 12 collies. The
Mm-hmm.
collies tended to have a little bit more kennel space than the boxers did. A little bit easier to manage in the kennels. You can put boxers side by side in a row of kennels, and they start running fences and getting pretty prey driven, and that's not what I wanted my dogs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they ended up into foster families.
Right, got it. Um, Now, I want to specifically ask you the next question about actually sending your dog. Sending your dogs. Actually, not when I say dogs, I actually sent two of them to India. It was Tickitbou's Great Expectations and Tickitbou's Laredo. How did this particular arrangement come about?
So Sonny Dhaliwal, is that how you say his name?
Yes.
Last name? Okay. So
Yeah.
Sonny approached me many times. We
Mm-hmm.
had many, many conversations, and he really wanted to bring a dog to India um, and make it a top boxer in India. And there he is. That's Dickens. Yeah.
Right.
Um, it was a lot for me to say yes. Tickitbou's red tab had gone to the Philippines and had returned and come back in excellent condition, and I'd had a really good experience with that. So I took a chance. Um, Great Expectations. I also had his litter brother in Toronto, and I had another litter brother in Montreal. So for me, letting him go, I still had his pedigree accessible to me. So if something ended up going bad, I wasn't completely out of that pedigree. Um, but, you know, I could not have asked for anything more positive. I would only wish that every dog that I sold to a show home or placed in a show home would be treated as well as that dog was.
Right.
I wish I could be treated as well as that dog was.
Right. Right. Um, Well, I think you might be well aware of how they did in India. They did leave a legacy in India in terms of, in terms of both in the showing and as well as in terms of what they contributed to the developing box as well.
That's
So
wonderful.
yeah, so thank you for doing that, and I think that was really a good thing that you did. Um, I'm actually moving on into artificial insemination or questions about artificial insemination. Um, Now, this is a question, it's a staple question, Rhoda, for all the interviews that we've had. And the reason behind that is because AI is tried and tested in this part of the world, but it's actually still in the infancy in India. Indian Kennel Club, the parent body, the Kennel Club of India, recognized the artificial insemination in dogs in May of this year. So there is a lot of appetite for knowledge and information about artificial insemination. So my question to you is: you might have tried it during your program, and I apologize for not doing a research about the artificial insemination part in your breeding program. But what is your opinion? Is what I wanted to get your thought on. And then just to give it a little bit additional context, there's a school of thought that practice of using AI is an indication that we are not moving forward, but we are actually going backward. We made very little progress, and that's why we're going back to those dogs. In light of these things, what are your thoughts about AI?
I have definitely heard that train of thought. Um, My thoughts on that are that as we move forward and as the breed moved forward through the 90s, we lost a lot of breed type. Our dogs became taller and straighter. Um, at that point, there was not a lot of great stud dogs out there to access, and the dogs that came before them, Dynasty, Crown Sable, um, those dogs became very important to have access to with frozen semen. And I dare any breeder to look back at those dogs today and not think that they could be of value to their breeding program in some way. So by going back in the past, it's the same as accessing any dog that is in the presence. There are attributes that you're hoping to get from those dogs. Were they lesser quality dogs than we have now? No. Are the dogs better quality now than back then? No. It's the pedigree, it's the phenotype, it's, individual attributes that you're trying to get, the same as doing any other breeding. And the nice thing about those dogs of the past is we know what they produce.
Right.
They're a known.
True. Um, agreed. I think, and again, having been, I know you started in boxes around the 80s, in the late 80s and early 90s. Um was there what why did this happen? Any indication as to why the dogs became taller? Was that something? Did we have an influx of tall dogs which actually pushed the breed's height up? What do you think what happened with that?
I think where that came from is there's kind of, and it's not so much Canada. The Canadian dogs maintained their size. The
Right.
U.S. dogs got very tall, and to be noticed in that working group, there are a lot of really big breeds in that working group.
Hmm.
For a boxer to stand out at 23, 24 inches in height, it didn't happen. So, all of a sudden a taller dog started to get noticed. And it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's what we need to do. We need to breed bigger. And the
Right.
minute you start breeding bigger, you lose something. And what we lost were our front ends.
Right. Right. True. Thank you for that. Now, my next question is actually also about these the new recent trend in the top winning boxes. For many years we had the top winning boxes. Males did a lot of domination. The male dogs did a lot of winning, but in the recent years, and I would say at least in the last 10 years, we've had three boxes that have actually been notable and they've been winning a lot. I talk about the two Windfall sisters, one showed by Diego and one by Michael, and then the most recent dog, which is Wilma, who we coincidentally happened to have Wilma's breeder last week. So,
Yes.
and we see a lot more female bitches in the showing, winning top honors. How do you see that trend?
Um, I think the strength in our breed has always been in our bitches.
Hmm.
Looking back and thinking of, being at specialties, it was always the bitches that caught my eye. There may be one or two dogs that I would look at and go, oh, wow. But going back to competing in the working group, the boys have more presence. Okay, so the boys have the bigger chest, um, they have the stallion-like look, um, easier for them to stand out in that working group. So for a bitch to go into that working group and be successful, they have to be extraordinary. And we have been very fortunate to have extraordinary handlers handle extraordinary bitches and bring our girls to the forefront.
Mm.
Could just anybody go in and special bitches like Diego or Michael have done? Probably not. They just don't get noticed as well. But boy, when those guys get their hands on something that is special, you better sit back and watch, because everybody is going to take notice.
Right, right. True, true. Um, Now, there's also another, again, there's also a question in a novice breeder or a fancier's mind. Why do these bitches that win big don't produce anything notable? There have been many examples in the past. Why do you
Mm-hmm.
think that is?
Um, I think our expectations, number one, on what these bitches should be producing are extremely high. We want them to reproduce themselves, and that generally does not happen. In my experience, I had um, Dickon's mom, Ice, Tickitbou's Caution Black Ice. To me, she was an extraordinary bitch. And I found that she never produced herself. She gave me some really nice dogs, but I never was wowed by her offspring. What wowed me was the next generation, though.
Mm,
So I think when you have bitches or dogs like that, you're not necessarily going to see that beautiful offspring from them. They're going to produce like every other dog does.
mm,
But I think where you're going to see that come through is in the second generation down from them. And that has been my experience, anyways. The other
right.
reason why we don't typically see um, great offspring from those top producing bitches is that they're bred a lot later in life. They've competed until they're 4 years old, maybe 5 years old. Um, Putting a boxer bitch back in the ring that has been bred, they don't have the underline. They're not usually as tight and as fit as they should be. So you hold them off. Um, you may only get one kick at the can to do a breeding with those bitches.
Mm,
And you never really get a chance to see what they're going to produce. If that one breeding hasn't given you, those phenomenal dogs, they're
true.
kind of hid because you don't want people seeing that maybe they haven't reproduced themselves.
Right. They're
So
setting the
those
bar
puppies,
high.
yeah,
Right.
those puppies we don't see.
Right. True.
Yeah.
True. Um, no, thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense, Rhoda, in terms of and again, as a kennel, you will have some dogs which will do their, which will do their job in the whelping box, and some
Hmm.
dogs will do it in the show ring, which is totally
Absolutely.
understandable. Yeah, yeah.
One of my best producers was not a champion boxer. She had
Mm,
fractured her elbow at 6 weeks and never gotten cropped because she had to have elbow surgery. And boy, did that bitch produce.
mm, true, true. Um, Now, again, on the question, on the topic, and then you mentioned about the picks, right? You mentioned about the first pick and the second pick. So my next question is going to be about the. Is my next two questions are going to be about the puppy. How do you evaluate the potential of the show prospect? Um, my first question to this is: what is the best age to evaluate the potential of a show prospect according to you, Rhoda? And the second part of this question is, if a puppy, let's say you have two puppies in the litter, and one of them is got a great temperament, is a good puppy, but it's got a great temperament, and the other puppy has got a great conformation and exudes breed type, but it's not as good in temperament. It's a little bit on the shyest, on the shy side.
Yep.
Which one would you pick over the other? So that would be my two questions about evaluating the puppies at the show at that early age.
I evaluate my puppies from the minute I'm drying them off. As soon as they latch onto mom, I can see that arch of neck, I can see that tail set, and usually I pick my puppies out in the first 24 hours, and I seldom change my mind. If I'm going in to evaluate a litter, I want to see those puppies at 8 or 9 weeks, depending on how they've developed. You know, if you have a slower developing litter, maybe 9 weeks, but typically for a boxer puppy, I find 8 weeks is the best. By 12 weeks, most lines are getting the ganglies and not so pretty anymore.
Mm.
For me, if I am being completely honest, I may get slammed for this, but if I have got a fabulous puppy with a softer temperament, that's the puppy I will take every time. I will not compromise conformation for temperament.
Mm.
I can always breed that bitch, that dog, to a more outstanding temperament than what I have, but to get the angulation, to get the front and rear, to get that beautiful headpiece, to get that high station, to get that type,
Mm-hmm.
I want,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't come along every day, and you have
Right.
to cherish it when you get it.
Mm.
You have to um, manage that beautifully. And being a handler, you know, I've got a lot of knowledge to work on that softer temperament and make it into a fabulous show dog.
Right. Right. Um, I think I think that leads me to my next question about handling. Temperaments. Um, do I often see dogs with great conformations, which don't do as well as dogs with great temperaments. Um, so again, from the perspective of from the perspective of understanding what is more important for somebody who's new to the breed, what would you say is more important? Would you say breed type is more important, or is it the temperament that is more important? What would give you more success in the showing?
As a breeder, you know, when we're talking temperament, I'm going to
Hmm.
backtrack a bit. Um, Living with a kennel of boxers, if I had boxers who were like out there with personality, um, over the moon, like go get them, you know that crazy in your face dog,
Hmm.
they were hell to live with in a kennel. You know, if you line up 5 of those side by side, it was nonstop challenging each other. Their prey drives start coming out, they start fence fighting. So for me to live with dogs in the kennel and to live with them in my house, I started breeding for a softer temperament. You know, I started breeding for that dog that will gladly come in and curl up on the couch. And families appreciated that. You know, the families don't want to have to deal with that high prey drive. Um, and that's what comes along with that really outgoing temperament.
Mm.
So then, you know, managing that softer temperament um, in the show ring becomes a challenge. And what I found is that certain lines for sure developed temperaments and personalities much slower than others. So going back to that Crown Sable line, it was a challenge. The Salgray line was a challenge. They had softer temperaments. Beautiful to live with. The sweetest dogs in the
Mm.
world to live with. But you better you better be patient.
Oh, you need it for the oh, for coffee? No, we're gonna start grooming. Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
That's why I said out.
Serge. Thank you.
That's all right.
Sorry.
So you better be patient with them as they mature. And they are not puppy flyers. But at 2 years old, they've got their body and their mind finally connecting. And that's when these guys are ready to be shown. So, you know, that softer dog may not really be a softer dog. He may just be an immature dog. I think we push these puppies so much at such a young age, and we're looking for that puppy that's right out there, and those puppies become challenging to put into family homes. So, you know, you've got to take a step back and evaluate what is good for the breed to be in the family home. We don't want a shy dog, but do we want a dog that's going to challenge a family with everything they ask it to do? No.
Right.
You know? So getting back to the question, I think is for me, I will always choose that better conformation and a little softer temperament.
Wonderful.
I will never forsake the pretty dog for the temperament.
That's perfect. You know, you've given so much of context about the, you know, about the temperament and, you know, the breeding philosophies behind breeding a softer temperament. That is actually that's really good. It's an eye opener of sorts for definitely for me for sure. Now my next question is about Rhoda. You're on the road for most of the times, as in, you know, you have some dogs like Black Eyes, which was a top producing, which was a top winning bitch in the show ring. Now, typically dogs get ready. Some dogs get ready late. Some dogs get early. Now, from a training perspective, does it actually change? Do you change the way according to according to how experienced the dog is? Like, for example, if it's an older dog, should you be training that dog ever so often because you're going to get them into a boredom of things? How often should you be training an older dog if you're going to be showing a dog in the ring?
So, as breeders, we know that boxers can get ring sour very quickly. You know, you've got to handle these guys with kid gloves. You've got to indulge their personalities, and you've got to keep it absolutely fun. Overtraining a boxer is one of the worst things that you can do, in my opinion. For me, our dogs typically will travel with us on the road from the moment that they have all of their vaccines, and we'll learn the life of a show dog, learn to have fun, and when that show lead goes on, that's their time to shine. I may only work a dog once a week. Conditioning is a different story. Okay? I think conditioning your dogs puts them into a mind that they then become working dogs. Okay? So show training and conditioning, I think, need to be separated. They're not the same thing. If you've got a dog that is like an athlete, that is on a schedule where he is biked or treadmilled or whatever, he becomes that athlete that wants to do that job. Okay?
Got it.
Once a boxer has got its basics in show training, I will complete my show training in the ring.
Got it.
Like I don't concentrate on getting that perfect stack at home. We're fortunate in Canada that we can get into empty rings at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. So, you know, they learn there. I also teach handling classes. So my dogs would come with us once a week and get training then. But overtraining them is going to backfire.
Right. True. My next question is, again, you know, since you give handling classes and you are, you know, you have been showing dogs for a long time, I want to ask if you have any tips to offset the crabbing. You know, boxes not moving in a straight line. Do you have any offset to correct that issue with the dog?
Okay, so For me, when I'm showing a dog, it's very important that they learn to carry themselves without handler interference. All right. So typically, if you see a dog that is crabbing or sidewinding on the down and back, there has been some sort of handler error or handler interference with that dog. You know, if you can move that dog on a loose lead on that down and back, they're not going to move sideways. They're going to go straight. Because if you let the dog go without a lead, they're going to run in a straight line.
Mm.
Okay, you take away the handler interference, that dog's going to move straight. So there's a few things that will cause it. Overangulation in the rear in boxers is a big thing. I remember years ago, one of my mentors telling me that a good boxer that's well angulated cannot do a down and back. And I do believe that. You know, if you've got that big front and that big rear, and you want to see that dog go straight down and back, it's not going to happen. They have to move their rear end out of their front end. If you've got a dog that is constructed to the breed standard, where we have moderate angles front and rear and they're balanced, that dog's going to move well on the down and back. It's going to move beautiful. But if they have that big rear and that big front, they have to get it out of the way somewhere.
Right.
So some tips and tricks are, I have a horse background, and I always come back in my training to my horse background. Okay, so when you're riding a horse, you want to teach them to have their own carriage. You want to teach them to move forward on loose reins. It's the same principle with the dog. You need to teach them to carry themselves. So I'll work on the lunge, and I'll move them clockwise on the lunge, on about a 6 foot lead, and teach them to hold their head in the right position, teach them to gait at the proper pace, and teach them to move without my interference. Then I'll take them from there and I'll practice down and backs, and only down and backs. If I find that they're forging or getting heavy on the lead, I'll stop, turn back, and I want the dog paying attention. I want the dog to know that at any time I'm going to stop and turn. So they can't depend on me to guide them. They have to stay with me, and they have to carry themselves, and they have to have intuition as to what this crazy handler is going to do, because they're going to change it up all the time, right?
Right. Right.
And the minute I stop, the dog is coming into a free bait. I'm giving them a little spank in the bottom and goosing them up. I'm keeping it fun. And then around will go again, and then down and back. So the more this happens, the faster the pace becomes. The dog brings in this beautiful carriage because they're waiting for that free bait, and they're waiting for the food reward. So they become more upright on their forehand, on their front. When they get down on their front, the movement falls apart. When they're up and carrying themselves, they should start moving better. Then we'll practice our down and backs again. And at that point, you'll see a change. If that doesn't work, I'll move to the non-show side and try them that way. And sometimes that works.
Right. Perfect. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So typically you move them anti-clockwise, and you run them clockwise. That's one. And you typically move them on the left. You move them on the right to see if that works, if that actually, and primarily make sure that you get them used to the loose lead, so that they you simulate as much as possible the natural movement, so they move in a straight line.
Yeah. And when I say loose lead, I'm not talking like my hand down by my side and a loop lead. I still have contact with the dog. I'm still guiding the dog, but I don't have a tight lead. They're moving on their own.
I actually didn't plan it this way, but my next question is exactly about the lead, the tightness or the looseness of the lead. And there is a common complaint against you know the fancy handling of boxers, that most of the times the dogs are strung up too much to camouflage the movement, the crossing of the front legs. Um, this is done a lot in lot by professional handlers. This is a complaint of sorts. What are your thoughts about that?
So going back to that, um, with the handler interfering in the dog's movement,
Hmm.
I really don't think that if a handler is a good handler, that they will purposely string up a dog to interfere with the movement. A dog has to be a pretty bad handler, or a pretty bad dog, a pretty bad mover, for
Hmm.
the handler to have that much contact. Because again, the moment we start interfering with their natural movement is when that movement starts falling apart. Okay, so we
Right.
want them to carry themselves as
Mm.
best they can. If I've got a dog that is on a tight lead, um, and I want to correct movement, the dog will be in a short lead. It's not going to be tight, but I'm going to change my pace. And I'm going to,
Mm.
if the dog has a very short stride and can't open up his stride, I'm going to make my stride short to match that. But to string up a dog to
Right.
to camouflage a bad front is only going to accentuate a bad front.
Right.
So
Right. True.
get
All
them
right.
on a
That's.
softer lead.
Thank you. Um, we are almost close to time, Rhoda. I'm just going to have one last question for you before I let you get into the showing aspect again. Um, any words of wisdom that you would like to share with the newcomers, up and coming newcomers who aspire to make a career in handling dogs for clients?
Um, Keep it fun. If it's not fun, it shows, and it
Hmm.
shows on the dogs you bring into the ring. Um, it it shows to your clients, and when you're dealing with a living, breathing animal, if you don't have a great attitude, it rubs off on them.
Hmm.
Um, I've worked as a professional handler for 30 years, but it has been more of a hobby than um, than a career. Um, I never was one to take on a top special. I loved working with the class dogs and making them fancy. And if I could take a dog from the classes and win the group, that made my day. That
Hmm.
was so exciting to me.
Right.
And we always thought of every dog show on the weekend as our vacation away from home.
Hmm.
It was always fun. We kept it a family affair. It was my husband, my son, and I. He's grown up to continue on into the handling as well. Um, but surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with people that you can trust, and absolutely have fun with it.
That's wonderful. Very, very rightly said, Rhoda. And again, the fun that you have showing the dog, it shows in the ring. And
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Again, I do want to thank you. I do, before we get your final thoughts, I do want to take a moment to thank my team who's been working in the background. My team comprises of Jay Sinha, Sushant, Satish, and Kadir Narayan. Um, I do again want to take this opportunity to thank you, Rhoda, for being gracious with your time uh, amidst your busy schedule, and for sharing your journey with Boxes. This is extremely important, and this interview will be available as a permanent record on the YouTube, in YouTube. also for more people to watch and learn from your experience. Thank you so much again, Rhoda.
Thank you so much for doing this. I think this is a fabulous educational piece. More clubs should take note and do the same thing. I am absolutely so impressed with the format, the content, everything that you've put together. Congratulations.
Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, Rhoda. Have yourself a wonderful day, and I hope you get a few best in shows today. You have 2 rings, and I hope you do well today.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.